Power to the forgotten. My grandfather, Obiapuna OKIGBO, was born in a little village, Ojoto, which is about 15 kilometers away from Onitsha, in the first decade of the 20th century. At the time of his birth, Onitsha had already become a British protectorate, which meant that they had started putting down some of the basic building blocks of a modern society. However, just over half a day's trek to Ojoto, it remained in its pre-modern idealism. Life or social and economic activities in this village followed the rhythms of the rising and the setting of the sun. By the time of his death in 1968, Ojoto had also acquired some of these trappings of a modern society, like documented rule of law, economic infrastructure like electricity, etc. In fact, he had also become more modern because he took an English name, Patrick. Over 120 years later, 100 million Nigerians still live in the same type of society my grandfather met at the point of his birth. They haven't started the long walk to modernity. They don't have access to power. Life in these communities still follow the rhythm of the rising and the setting of the sun. But there's a solution that is right there before us, and that is what I wish to talk about today. But before I do that, I'd like to take us through the value chain of the power sector, talk about the solution, and then what we need to do to actualize it. As we know, the value sector chain, it starts from generation. We have an installed capacity of maybe about 13,000 megawatts. But the power that goes through the generating plants, through the transmission plants, is constrained. Because although we have the 13,000 megawatts, we can only produce about 7,000. That 7,000 we can produce is really constrained by gas availability. Gas availability is constrained by the intermittent vandalization of pipelines, but more importantly, it's constrained because the generating companies cannot pay for the gas. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. That 7,000 megawatts gets to the transmission line, and it is constrained by the capacity of the transmission line. Think about the transmission line like a pipe. It can only take about 4,000, 5,000 megawatts. So of that 7,000 we can produce today, 2,000 is stranded or wasted. The 5,000 that comes through is also constrained. By the time it gets into the distribution network, faulty transformers, crossed wires, etc., it drops further. So we have 13,000 capacity. On a good day, we get 4,000. But that's not where the problem lies. I've just talked about the technical challenges. The big problem is in the commercial losses. Today, Nigeria has about 500 trillion shortfall in the sector. I said trillion. This shortfall is driven by two main factors. I call it the two T's. The first is tariffs, the second is theft. Tariff: who in this room would bake a cake with 65 naira and sell it for 25 naira? I don't see a hand up because nobody would do that. But that's exactly what we do in the sector today. Everyone, government, private sector, everyone understands that what we charge for tariff does not cover the cost of producing the power. We've come up with different names around it, but the fact is that we are losing money because we are not charging the right thing. Now, Nigerians know that what we have been asked to pay, 25 naira, is not what we pay to fire our generators, whether it's petrol or diesel. That goes for about 110 or 220 naira. Or it's even worse for people who use kerosene lanterns. They pay a lot more for an equivalent of 1 unit of electricity. Now, move to the second part, theft. Most of the distribution companies, on average, they've metered about 40% of the customers. Even that, so that means that the rest of the population, you have to charge them estimated billing, and we know how we hate paying estimated billing. So everyone looks for a way to get around not paying the estimated bills. The people who've got meters, we've also figured out how to bypass the meters. So lots of Nigerians use power without paying for it. That is theft. We call it bypass, but it's theft. Yeah, so let's call it its real name. All of these cumulate to the 500 trillion naira and a lot of other things in there that we're suffering as a shortfall. Because of all of these issues, the discos cannot pay the transmission company. So the transmission company cannot pay the generating company. The generating company cannot pay the gas company. And that is why we don't have power. Theft, tariffs. Now, what can we do about it? If we haven't been able to provide power to the people who are connected to the grid, what can we do? Why am I bullish that we can connect the 100 million Nigerians who do not even have connections today? It is because I know that there is a solution today that can allow us to do to the grid what MTN did to Nitel. We can completely leapfrog the grid to provide power to these people who are our brothers and sisters who are forgotten, who are still living in the same world my grandfather, Obiapuna, not Patrick, met at his birth. So, what would you say if I told you that there is a community in Nigeria that for the last 3 years have enjoyed uninterrupted power supply? No blinking, no half current, no up NEPA. You're probably thinking maybe Aso Rock or one of the state government houses. If you're thinking that, you're wrong. There's a community 60 kilometers from Mina in Niger State, Bizante. It is still stuck in that pre-modern state that my grandfather met at the point of his birth. Social and economic activities in this community still follow the rhythms of the rising and the setting of the sun. But about 3 years ago, a company called GVE Projects, run by Ifeanyi Orajaka, went into the community and deployed a mini grid. Interestingly, Ifeanyi started his company somewhere around here in Port Harcourt, and the first plant they deployed is in a shared local government, somewhere around here. Because of the power they've put into Bizante, women have been able to start small businesses, children are able to study way into the night, all other types of small businesses have started to come up. So Bizante, 120 years later, has now finally started its walk to modernity. That is the solution we need to provide to these communities where we have forgotten Nigerians. But it's not all rosy. I mean, there are lots of mini grids around Nigeria. There are lots of other solutions that we can talk about. But some of these solutions have more challenges than the mini grid. Take, for instance, we can do compressed natural gas, right? But you then have to deal with the problem of the logistics of getting the gas to the plant. You can also do small hydro, but you deal with issues of climate change, flow velocities, etc. But solar, the source of the fuel is sustainable. I mean, we know that the sun will rise and set every day. The day the sun chooses not to rise, our big problem will not be the mini grid. We'll be thinking of something else that they're thinking about in heaven, right? There are some other ideas around nuclear, yeah? But we know that the people who are proposing the idea of nuclear know that we know that they're joking. So we won't spend any time talking about that. Now, so what are the challenges with mini grids? Technology is still a bit of a challenge because there's a wide range of quality issues when you talk about the panels and the batteries, etc. But you've got the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria, which is a group of solar developers who've come together to think about these challenges and how they can bring standardization, to the process. We also have problems of financing. Unfortunately, because of the challenges we have in the grid power sector, where banks invested in these traditional power companies and have not recovered their loans, they've maxed out on their obligor to the power sector. So it's difficult for them, even when they do understand it, to make loans to the sector. Then you've got, maybe there could be money coming in from foreign investors, but like we say in the part I come from, if the first son has not learned how to walk, the second son will probably not learn how to run. So the local banks need to make money. before the foreign investors can come in. But there are solutions, right? And there's a role I see for government. Like we have in Nollywood. Nollywood could step in and create an entire industry on its own, but they are challenged by things like piracy. The same thing is happening in the space, in the mini-grid space. Private sector players can go and deploy these solutions, but they have a few challenges. They have challenges with regulation. The current mini-grid regulation states that you cannot set up a mini-grid within 10 kilometers of the distribution network. That's a bit of a challenge that we know that the NERC and the government institutions can look at, correcting that. There's also a limit of 1 megawatt. Maybe that's another area for regulation to deal with. Now, secondly, government can look at a bouquet of support. There are issues with land acquisition. Government can step in and play a role in mediating and being an unbiased umpire in ensuring that the private sector and the community can work together. The second challenge is most of the players in the mini grid are small players. And if they have to spend a lot of money on the studies, they might not have monies to spend on the project itself. So a role for government could be to engage in doing massive studies across Nigeria and pointing out locations where mini grids can be deployed so that the private sector comes straight and deploys these solutions. The third in a list of things we can talk about is innovation. Today, because of the way the laws are written up, it is difficult for a mini grid to locate within a distribution network. Not impossible, difficult. However, there are innovative ideas that are emerging. For instance, in Kanu and Kaduna Discos distribution networks, they're pioneering an effort to see if a mini grid developer can take a franchise, a small space within their network, generate the power, distribute the power, collect payments, provide customer service, provide after-sales support to that catchment within the network. We are watching to see how that plays out because it could then be a model that Nigeria can adopt to provide power to the forgotten. In conclusion, I think it is a fundamental human right to provide power to every human being, especially because that is the opportunity you get to get on that long climb to modernity. Without power, many communities in Nigeria will still remain in that pre-modern existence that my grandfather met. It is wrong. No Nigerian should be born in the 21st century without access to power. In fact, I dare to propose that the National Assembly should consider an amendment to the Constitution that says that access to power is a fundamental promise the Nigerian state owes every individual who is born into this country. If we do this, then maybe we will provide power to the forgotten. Thank you.